So, yeah, welcome to our last Dharma talk of this session. We've been talking about the Diamond Sutra, which is an ancient Buddhist text. Uh, like I said, the earliest guesstimate of its composition is the 2nd century AD. And just quickly, for those who are just joining us, it kind of chronicles a dialogue, or records a dialogue between the Buddha himself and one of his practitioners, Subhuti. And so we've been talking about the first few chapters of this Diamond Sutra, rather. The Diamond Sangha is a Rinzai Zen community out of Hawaii, started by Robert Aitken. So I figured we'd move on. We finished yesterday talking about the practice of unattached charity, having no thoughts of appearances or the form of giving, giving just as you reach for your pillow in the middle of the night. And then the day before that, we were talking about a few things. Yeah, we talked about this last chapter. The Buddha ends by saying, all that has a form is elusive and unreal. My body, my relationships, my family, my job, my bank account, my practice, all of these forms are elusive and unreal. When you see that all forms are elusive and unreal, then you will begin to perceive your true Buddha nature. So that's kind of the last chapter um, that we left off at, even though we talked about it 2 days ago. So then we go on to the next chapter. It's called Awaken Faith. And I love these Dharma talks because this sutra is so powerful, I just kind of have to read it. I don't have to say anything, but I'll see if I can add a little something. So Subhuti, the practitioner who's talking with the Buddha here, Subhuti respectfully asked the Buddha, "Most honored one, in the future, if a person hears this teaching, even if it is only a phrase or a sentence, is it possible for that person to have a true faith and knowledge of enlightenment awaken in their mind?" It's an interesting question. So, do these teachings, do these words, are they durable? Will they last? Or are we just kind of in some special cult? I guess that's what he's asking. I remember Sason saying one of the signs of a cult is that, it doesn't have staying power. It's very much like just focused around this person who's like doing the teaching. So that's kind of how I see this. Like is this for real? Like once you're gone and, all 1,000 of us are gone, is this gonna withstand the test of time, basically? Is this legitimate? And then the Buddha responds, without a doubt, Subhuti, even 500 years after the enlightenment of this Buddha, it's kind of funny, we're now 2,500 years after, even 500 years after the enlightenment of this Buddha, there will be some who are virtuous and wise. And while practicing compassion and charity, they will believe in the words and phrases of this sutra and will awaken their minds purely. It's interesting. There will be some who are virtuous and wise. Kind of reminds me of a koan, well, many koans actually, where usually they end with the teacher saying, who can live like this? Or who spends their days like this? And the point is, it's not about some special some or few, but can each of us accede to that call? Are we being virtuous and wise right now? While practicing compassion and charity, that's interesting. Practicing compassion and charity. So much of our practice and so much of the Buddha's practice was sitting, right? To the best of my knowledge, I don't think the Buddha was like out starting homeless shelters. He wasn't, uh, you know, protesting climate change. I think he basically just sat and taught people, and by teaching, he really was just dialoguing. So is that practicing charity? We talked about that a little bit yesterday, how sitting in here, doing sesshin, um, really can carry charitable energy. At least for me, I really feel like I am doing action just by sitting still and genuinely, authentically trying to let go. I really think that is charity. That's what it feels like. So they will be practicing compassion and charity, and they will believe in the words and phrases of this sutra and will awaken their minds purely. After they come to hear these teachings, they will be inspired with belief. That's interesting, huh? Talking about belief and faith. I meet so many people who, have maybe read a little bit about Buddhism, have never practiced it, and they say, I really love Buddhism because you don't have to believe in anything. It's literally what they say. I love Buddhism because you don't have to believe in anything. And yeah, in my experience, that's not true at all. Because, well, you have to see for yourself. But it does take faith that this practice works, faith that everything is one, even when I don't see it. Um, and that faith, that belief, drives us to keep practicing. And of course, the actual, this session is dedicated, Echo dedicated it to direct experience. And we talk about that all the time. That's like the deal. That's what we're doing here. We're trying to see for ourselves beyond the shadow of a doubt that it is not two and it is not one. Beyond the shadow of a doubt, see my Buddha nature, see how awakened I truly am. But just like everything is impermanent, that direct experience also just wind. And so we have to have the faith that we can become more and more intimate with that experience. So yeah, after they come to hear these teachings, they will be inspired with belief, right? Not inspired by like evidence, inspired with belief. That's so interesting. This is because when some people hear these words, they will have understood intuitively that these words are the truth. And this is kind of foreshadowing the sixth ancestor's experience, right? Hui Neng. We talked about how he was enlightened walking on the street and heard this sutra. Like literally, it's exactly what the Buddha predicted. When some people hear these words, they will have understood intuitively that these words are the truth, right? So it's like not introducing a new teaching. It's not introducing new concepts. It's simply revealing what we intuitively know to already be the case. At least, yeah, I mean, I can speak for myself. That's what happened with me. I heard the Four Noble Truths, and it didn't feel like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. It felt more like, yeah, yeah, that's what I've been feeling this whole time. Because that's what we are. Buddha nature is what we are. And we're born into this world where we have to throw all these ideas and concepts and personalities and identity and everything on top of what we are, so we don't see it. But intrinsically, Buddha. And the Buddha continues, you must also remember, Subhuti, that such persons have long ago planted the seeds of goodness and merit that led to this realization. That's interesting. It might be easy to misunderstand this as like me, Bobby, had these past lives where me, Bobby, was like accruing merit and goodness and planting the seeds so that I could, but I think that's super mistaken. Um, I think that if we're going to really talk about oneness, direct experience or belief, then all of us are the Mongol in the 4th century, and all of us are the Pope in 1376, and all of us are um, Kashyapa Buddha, who was the Buddha before the Buddha we know, right? Ultimate oneness means that every seed is being planted by all of us constantly. We are all planting these seeds of goodness and merit right now for the folks 2,000 years from now. So yeah, it's not just like me, this special person has like been special enough to stumble upon the Buddha way. No, countless, numberless beings have been setting the stage and planting the seeds for my awakening, for our awakening right now. There's nothing special about us. Your practice is the result of billions and billions of beings and universes, all leading to this moment. They have planted the seeds of good deeds and charity not simply before one Buddhist temple, or 2 temples, or 5, but before hundreds of thousands of Buddhas and temples. Yeah, so just kind of hammering in that same point. So when a person who hears the words and phrases of this sutra is ready for it to happen, a pure faith and clarity can awaken in their minds. Faith and clarity. That's awesome. Sometimes we think those are at odds, right? Faith is like, oh, yeah, that thing that, like, I think, but clarity, clear faith. Yeah. Buddha continues, Subhuti, any person who awakens faith upon hearing the words or phrases of this sutra will accumulate countless blessings and merit. And of course, as we talked about yesterday, this countless, I don't think, the way I'm seeing it right now at least, I don't think that means so many. There's so much merit and blessings that you can't even count them. But rather impossible to count, like you can't count 0. There is no quantity of blessing and merit. They will accumulate countless blessings and merit. What does that feel like? Accumulating 0 blessings and merit. Infinity blessings and merit. Beginningless, endless blessings and merit. How do I know this? Because this person must have discarded all arbitrary notions of the existence of a self, other people, or of a universal self. So yeah, we talk about this a lot. Um, This person, who is this person? It's us. It's you right now. Must have discarded all arbitrary notions of the existence of a personal self. Anatman. That's one of the core teachings of Buddhism. This little self that I think is uh, my partner, my friend, my teacher. If I cling to the idea that they are a thing separate from any other thing, well, then I guess you won't be accumulating any blessings and merit. Um, yeah, discarding. That's kind of what Zazen is, right? Just this, just your breath, just counting, just listening, just your koan. And then all of these forms and ideas and notions creep up. Oh, I have to call so and so. Oh, I have to deal with this and that. Oh, how am I going to finish the blah, blah, blah? And then we kind of catch it, and then we just simply discard it. We're not mad at it, it's not evil. Just simply, right? They say letting go the hand of thought, right? Just simply discard. And if we do that over and over and over again, then this intrinsic, intuitive truth slowly gets revealed over and over. So, yeah, these people discard with these arbitrary senses of self. Otherwise, he continues, their minds would still grasp after such relative conceptions. Furthermore, these people must have already discarded all arbitrary notions of the non existence of a personal self, other people, or universal self. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Man, when I read that, I was like, okay, yummy. That's the good stuff, right? So, just as important as discarding of these notions of self and other, right? That famous koan where Zwegan says, Master, and he answers, yes. He says, do not be deceived by others, right? Do not think that there's such a thing as other people who are separate from you. Just as important as that is discarding the notion that the self doesn't exist and that other people don't exist. Man, I really hope that's the beautiful part right there. That's where it all comes together. Form is emptiness is just one side. Emptiness is form, equally important. And to get caught up in self or no self is to just be caught up. You know, folks going into the Doksan room or going in for interview or Daison, and how many times have we gone in there and tried to be like, well, the relative self, and then but then the absolute self, and then the true Buddha nature, and so if I have to like do the relative self, then and we're trying to explain away with all these concepts of these things that we read about and know about Buddhism, um, completely misses the mark. And I think it's the same with our life, right? That's why we keep saying not knowing. Not knowing is the most intimate. If we go into anything saying, this is how it works, this is how it, um, we're stuck. Even scientists. I really appreciate my good friend Kaveh, who always reminds me. He was a neuroscience major, and then a doctor now. And he always says the point of science and the scientific method is to try to prove ourselves wrong. That's what we're trying to do in science. We're not trying to find truth. We're actually trying to find falsehood. We're trying to find mistakes. We're trying to shore up all the gaps. I mean, that's what science is doing. But I love that even science is more dedicated to like not knowing. What don't we know? Um, yeah. And so if we can enter into everything, whether it's zazen or koans or relationships or work or charity or all these things with a mind of not knowing, not self, not self, not two, not one, not delusion, not enlightened. Just let that go and completely just be what is. That's how detached charity and compassion arise. Um, Therefore, anyone who seeks total enlightenment, do you seek total enlightenment? That's a good question. Sometimes I don't know. Um, yeah, anyone who seeks total enlightenment should discard not only all conceptions of their own selfhood or other selves, but they should also discard all notions of the non existence of such concepts. So, yeah, just repeating that point. The other day I mentioned a koan, case 30 of the Book of Equanimity, where a monk goes to Daizui and he asks, when the Kalpa fire burns everything in the universe, is this being Buddha nature, is Buddha nature burned up with it? And Daizui says, yes, it is burned up. And the monk doesn't like that. So he goes to another teacher, to Ryusai, and says, when the big Kalpa fire burns up everything in the universe, does this burn up with it? Does Buddha nature burn up with it? And Ryusai says, no, it doesn't. And that's one way of really exemplifying not two, not one. Not perished, not perished. And then if we look actually at case 29 of the Blue Cliff record, we get the same koan, but just the first half. And I think it's interesting that it does enough, right? So in the case 29 Blue Cliff record, the monk comes to Daizui, it says, when the Kalpa fire comes, will Buddha nature burn up with everything else? And Daizui just says, yes, destroyed. And the monk says, so it goes along with that? And Daizui says, it goes along with that. And that, interestingly, kind of says the same thing, but maybe just more directly. Destroy everything. Destroy all notions. Anything you're grasping onto, let it go. Lose yourself in not knowing. And I really do think that helps in life, not just on the cushion, not just understanding the Buddha, teachings, not just passing koans, but really see what happens in your life if you just allow the kalpa fire to burn up everything you think is and be born fresh. Right? The first day we talked about how this, they say that like the main theme of this Diamond Sutra is non-abiding. Don't abide anywhere. Don't get stuck anywhere. How? Well, lots and lots of zazen is a good way. Not the only way, but a good one. Another example I wanted to bring up is so part of the koan study we do is the transmission of the light, the Denko Roku, where basically from the time of the Buddha all the way to Dogen, you read about the enlightenment stories or the transmission stories of all of the ancestors that whose names we chant in the morning. And Dogen's story, um, we don't have to go through the whole thing, but basically, eventually, he says, you know, something about dropping off body and mind. Right? That's kind of like a famous phrase that we say for this experience of emptiness, of no self. And then the teacher says, "What is that?" or "Say more," or something like that. And then Dogen says, "Dropping off, dropping off." What a simple, accessible, yet like totally comprehensive way of describing this kalpa fire. Dropping off, dropping off. Let go of all your notions, all your awakenings. So then the Buddha continues, when the Buddha explains these things using such concepts and ideas, people should remember the unreality of all such concepts and ideas. Yeah, so we say this all the time now, right? Like here we are giving Dharma talks about how you shouldn't listen to any Dharma talks. And it sounds ridiculous, but it's so relieving to hear the Buddha himself say that, right? When I explain these things using concepts and ideas of no self and relative and absolute and compassion and charity and unattached and non-abiding, y'all should remember the unreality of all of these concepts. I really appreciate Jyongak, who's a friend of our Sangha, and he comes and gives guest talks every once in a while. And his first talk here, he said, you should listen to Dharma talks as if you were a tree in the wind. And let the wind rustle some leaves, other leaves it might not, and then just let the wind pass. Let your leaves rustle and then let them be still. Seisan talks about this with Dogen. When you read Dogen, because it's so out there and so, I don't know, hard, just let the words go into your brain hole. Don't even think about them. Let them just kind of settle into your cells. Don't hold on to these concepts and ideas. Right? At the end of the Shuso Hosen Dharma talk, at the end of Ango, the Shuso, after their talk, says, I hope there's enough water in the Pacific Ocean to rinse my words from your ears. And for a long time, I thought that was like, you know, a show of humility. Like, oh, I'm just a Shuso. I'm not even a teacher, so don't listen to me. But no, the Buddha's saying it right here. Every single Dharma talk, I hope there's enough water in all the oceans to wipe these words, wash these words from our ears. He continues, they should recall that in teaching spiritual truths, the Buddha always uses these concepts and ideas in the way that a raft is used to cross a river. Once the river has been crossed, the raft is of no more use and should be discarded. Right? So yeah, let your leaves be blown and then forget about it. Take what you can. You know, you should hear the words of the Buddha in your belly, not in your mind. How do you hear with your belly? These arbitrary concepts and ideas about spiritual things need to be explained to us as we seek to attain enlightenment, right? We have to say something. We have to share the Dharma. We use language. This is like one of the unique tools that humans have. So we have to communicate. We have to say something, right? There are some koans where it might seem like a good idea to just be still or silent, but then a good teacher will say, no, like say something. You have to say something. When Nansen is dealing with the cat, and the monks of the two halls are fighting over the cat, and Nansen comes and he holds up the cat and he says, if anyone can give a turning word, I will spare the cat's life. I'm sure we've all heard that koan. And no one says anything. What's a turning word? Hi. Beautiful turning word. Say something. So yeah. So these concepts need to be explained as we seek to attain enlightenment. However, ultimately, these arbitrary concepts can be discarded. I wanted to find a koan that somehow talked about this like raft crossing the river and discarding concepts and whatever. And because I couldn't think of one off the top of my head, and I was like, you know what? I bet if I just grab one of these koan books and just turn to a page, maybe one of them might make some kind of sense. And I swear, I swear, I picked up the Book of Equanimity just randomly and just kind of turned to a random page, and I swear, with no inkling whatsoever, no idea whatsoever, the one page I turned to, and mind you, these books are like one page has the koan and there's like 3 pages of commentary. So I had a 75% chance of turning to a commentary page. But I picked a page that had a koan, and the koan is this. Kaku Joza showed up at Hogan's temple. Hogan asked him, "Did you arrive by land or by boat?" And Kaku says, "By boat." And Hogan says, "Where is the boat now?" And Kakujoza says, "The boat is in the river." And then he walks away. And Hogan turns to the monk next to him and says, "Tell me, did that monk there have the Zen eye or not?" So, I mean, come on. Raft being discarded, boat in the river, that's kind of crazy. Um, So, we don't have this koan, which actually also coincidentally was my Shuso koan when I was Shuso. Um, so I remember it well. Um, and working with it is different from how I'm using it here. It's just very apropos to this whole raft thing. So this is not necessarily how to work with this koan, but in reference to what the Buddha is saying, what a beautiful way of saying that, right? How did you get here by boat? How did you awaken? How has your journey been, your spiritual journey? Did you come here by land or by boat? By boat, where is that boat? Where is that teaching? Where is where are the things that carried you here? What are the things that carried you here? And just like the Buddha said, he said it's in the river, right? You can imagine maybe, literally it's probably like tied up and like, bobbing up and down in the river. But according to what the Buddha is saying here, you just kind of let the boat go. It's somewhere in the river. I let it go. Don't need it anymore. Anyway, that koan is pointing to some other things, but I thought that was really uh, serendipitous that koan came up. So, and then he ends. Think, Subhuti, isn't it even more obvious that we should also give up our conceptions of non-existent things? Can't say anything better than that. So yeah, just a couple more periods here. A chance to come face to face and be really intimate with not knowing. Practice, right? We call it practice. We're practicing this so that when someone annoys us and we have that reaction, we can not abide there and say, what else is possible here? Or when I can't complete a task and I've been, using the knowledge that I have and have been using to do this task, we practice being able to let go and see a completely different side, right? The whole Nansen killing the cat koan, the end of it has to do with a monk putting his shoes on his head. And that points to various things as well. But one way, Seisan likes to talk about it at least, is turning things upside down. How many times have I decided, like, I'm just going to approach this or think about this in a completely new way, even though it doesn't make any sense or even though it's never been like that before. And that can open up a whole new world. So, yeah, let's really bear down and turn things upside down as best we can.